One thing I learned growing up on the farm is success was never about one person, one manager, or quite frankly, one leader. Hi, welcome to AI Chore Cast. I'm David Elser, and here we leverage AI to explore forward-thinking talent development ideas. So are you ready? Because it's time to do the chores. Yes, we need someone in control, but success is not just achieved by one person in control. Success is achieved by supporting others, learning from others, practicing collaboration, which involves cooperation and contribution. Success or achieving success is more than just having one person in authority. It's about having everyone within the organization collaborating. For the past 50 years, talent development has focused heavily on the whole command control philosophy, the leader versus manager philosophy. And to quite honestly, that is for the industrial era. We are now operating in what is called the post-industrial era. Look, we're doing AI Chore Cast, and we have a global audience, right? And so what we really need to do is rethink talent development. And that's what Talent Development 2.0 is all about. Because in the future, we really need to define what is a manager, what is a leader, what is a smart follower, that's a new one, and what is a collaborator? What does leadership mean? What does management mean? Well, those are some of the questions that I've been asking myself in the past couple of years, and that's why I've created Talent Development 2.0. That's why I wrote a book on doing the chores. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to ask AI, what do you think of Talent Development 2.0? So I threw in there as references to ask AI, what do they think? I threw in there the ATD's 2025 report, the annual talent development report. I threw in my book, of course. And I threw in there an article about holistic talent development. Because I believe the future is not necessarily creating more leaders. I think the future is creating better collaborators who understand what leadership is. And actually educating people what actually management is. And lastly, what is smart followership. Because like I said, when I kicked off this AI Chore Cast, success is not about one person in authority. It's about all of us coming together as collaborators in order to achieve organizational success. So let's dive into this deep dive and hear what AI thinks about Talent Development 2.0.
If you are an L&D professional, an HR leader, or an executive sitting in the C-suite, I really want you to think about a structural paradox in your organization right now.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Why are companies pouring the vast majority of their development budgets into a tiny percentage of the workforce at the very top?
Right.
It's a provocative observation, but when you look at how modern organizations actually operate, it becomes glaringly obvious that traditional leader-centric training models they're simply no longer sufficient. We're heavily indexing on the people designing the strategy and practically ignoring the people who actually execute it.
It is a fascinating disconnect. And the paradigm is shifting rapidly, and organizations that want to see true return on investment are realizing they have to rethink who actually gets trained.
Exactly.
And what that training even looks like. We are moving away from an outdated model and stepping into something far more holistic.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring why organizations need to evolve from what we could call Talent Development 1.0 to Talent Development 2.0. This is about shifting away from constantly chasing the new shiny object like the latest executive retreat or a trendy management seminar, and instead building a strategy that develops everyone. And I mean everyone, right down to the front line and deskless workers.
To do that, we have a fantastic stack of sources to unpack today. We are looking at David Elser's blog on holistic talent development, excerpts from his farm-inspired book called Doing the Chores, the Talent Development 2.0 definitions, and mind map.
Which is a great resource, by the way.
It really is. We also have Robert Kelly's foundational followership model, and we are grounding all of this in hard data from the newly released 2025 ATD State of the Industry report.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the reality check from that ATD data, because the numbers really tell the story of the friction in the industry right now. What are we actually seeing on the ground?
Well, the 2025 ATD State of the Industry report paints a very clear picture of tightening resources. The average direct learning expenditure per employee has dropped to $1,254. Yeah. And alongside that, the average number of formal learning hours used per employee fell from 17.4 down to 13.7 hours.
So budgets are shrinking, and the time allocated for learning is shrinking.
Exactly. But despite those dropping numbers, managerial and supervisory training still sits at a massive 91 to 97% across organizations, depending on their size.
That's incredible.
Almost all the resources are bottlenecked at the supervisor level and above.
I have to play devil's advocate here, because if I am an executive listening to this, my immediate pushback is going to be, well, of course I spend 90% of my budget on managers and supervisors.
Right. They're the leaders.
They're the ones making the million-dollar decisions. They are steering the ship.
Right.
So why should I divert my shrinking budget away from the people designing the strategy to focus on a deskless worker or a warehouse employee? Do organizations truly invest in development for deskless workers? How does Talent Development 2.0 answer that?
It answers it by looking at the reality of how work gets done. Frontline and shift-based workers make up the absolute majority of the global workforce.
Yeah.
They are the ones interacting with the customers, building the products, maintaining the systems. If the strategy is brilliant, but the execution fails because the frontline lacks basic problem-solving or communication skills, well, that million-dollar decision your manager made is practically worthless.
Makes sense.
Talent Development 2.0 is a holistic framework designed to close that exact execution gap.
But practically speaking, how do you train that massive workforce without just bankrupting the L&D department? I mean, you can't pull 100 factory workers off the floor for a 3-day seminar.
No, you can't. And that is the core difference between TD 1.0 and TD 2.0. The old model relied heavily on those formal training events, sitting in a classroom or forcing someone to click through a 45-minute e-learning module in the break room.
We've all been there.
Right. But TD 2.0 moves beyond that. It focuses on practical, accessible interventions embedded right into the workflow. We're talking about learning that is mobile, social, and visible.
Give me a concrete example of what an embedded intervention looks like for a deskless worker.
Sure. So instead of a massive quarterly safety seminar, it might be a 3-minute interactive video on a tablet that a forklift driver watches right before powering up a new piece of machinery.
Ooh, I like that.
Or it's a peer-to-peer social learning platform where nurses on a hospital floor can share a quick 60-second update on a new intake procedure. It happens in the flow of their actual day. That is how you prove ROI, by supporting every single role without destroying their productivity.
That makes a lot of sense. And the framework for TD 2.0 is built on 4 core pillars, right? Leadership, management, smart followership, and people skills.
Exactly.
And there's a really crucial shift in terminology here. In this new model, what traditional training often calls leadership skills, things like effective communication, teamwork, active listening, problem solving, those are actually referred to as people skills.
Yes, and that renaming is highly intentional. When we label communication or teamwork as a leadership skill, we implicitly signal that you only need to learn it if you are aiming for a promotion. But in TD 2.0, those are people skills because they apply to absolutely everyone in the organization. I mean, a barista needs conflict resolution skills just as much, if not more, than the regional director does.
Which naturally leads us to how this framework redefines the roles themselves. Because we use words like management and leadership interchangeably all the time in the corporate world, but they are very different disciplines in this model.
What's fascinating here is how clearly TD 2.0 separates them. A manager is explicitly defined as someone who uses their authority within an organization to maintain stability, control, and efficiency.
Okay.
Their primary focus is on planning, organizing, and directing resources to accomplish specific goals.
So management is really about authority and keeping the trains running on time. It is an operational function. But how does this model define leadership then? Because the common assumption is that leadership is just what happens when you get promoted to a high enough level of management.
And that is perhaps the biggest misconception in corporate training. Leadership is not just a higher level of management. Not at all. TD 2.0 defines leadership as an influence relationship among leaders and smart followers who become collaborators to enact meaningful change for their mutual benefit.
Let's pause there, because that is a massive paradigm shift. Leadership is an influence relationship. It does not rely on authority.
Right.
That means you don't actually need the title of manager to exhibit leadership.
Correct. A shift supervisor can be a manager without being a leader. Conversely, a veteran line worker with zero formal authority can be a massive leader on the floor simply because of their influence.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
Exactly. And that distinction introduces a really powerful concept. The true reciprocal of management isn't leadership. The reciprocal of management is smart followership.
How are we defining a smart follower in this context?
A smart follower is someone who actively learns from others, like mentors, coaches, or leaders, while enthusiastically and effectively providing support to help achieve shared goals and objectives.
So if management is about directing resources, followership is about enthusiastically supporting the achievement of those goals.
You got it.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal highlighted in the TD 2.0 mind map collaboration. The guiding principle states that anyone can be a leader. Everyone is a follower at times, but people perform at their absolute best when they become collaborators.
Right. A collaborator mutually influences and persuades others, with or without authority, to pursue a shared vision. It creates this dynamic where everyone is contributing at a high level rather than just relying on a top-down command structure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. While we could absolutely spend future deep dives exploring the nuances of leadership and management, today is strictly all about the follower. Because the follower is the unsung, untrained hero of organizational ROI.
Completely. And we have to look at Dr. Robert Kelly's research from Carnegie Mellon University to really understand the math behind this. His foundational model of followership uncovered a staggering fact.
This blew my mind. Yeah. Followers contribute an average of 80% to an organization's success. The leaders contribute the remaining 20%. Furthermore, followers complete 80 to 90% of the actual work in any given organization.
Let that sink in for a moment for anyone listening. 80 to 90% of the actual work. So going back to that executive who wants to spend all their money on manager training, if your followers are doing 90% of the heavy lifting and they are responsible for 80% of your success, ignoring their development is quite literally leaving money on the table. Are companies truly ready to move away from leader-centric development models to capture that ROI?
To capture it, they first have to understand who they are actually developing. Because not all followers are created equal. Kelly's model identifies 5 distinct followership styles based on 2 dimensions: their level of engagement and their level of independent critical thinking.
Let's break those down because this is where listeners will definitely start recognizing people on their own teams.
Oh, absolutely. First, you have the passive follower. This is someone who lacks initiative and does not think critically.
The person who finishes a task at 2 p.m. and just sits at their desk, staring at the wall until 5 p.m. because no one explicitly told them what to do next.
Exactly. They require constant supervision. Next is the conformist. They are highly engaged and energetic, but they lack independent critical thinking.
The ultimate yes man. They will excitedly drive a project straight off a cliff because they never pause to question if the boss's idea actually makes sense.
Right. Then you have the pragmatic follower. They have a moderate level of engagement and critical thinking. They essentially adapt just to survive. They keep their head down, avoid controversy, and do just enough to not get fired.
The people who kind of just disappear into the background during a crisis.
Yeah, they just vanish. Fourth is the alienated follower. Now, this one is dangerous. They are highly independent, brilliant, critical thinkers, but they are deeply disengaged and cynical.
I've seen this 100 times. The veteran engineer or the seasoned salesperson who knows exactly why the new corporate initiative is going to fail, but instead of speaking up to fix it, they just sit back with their arms crossed and watch it burn out of spite.
Exactly. They use their intelligence to critique rather than contribute. Finally, we arrive at the exemplary or effective follower. This individual is highly engaged and exercises independent critical thinking.
And this is where David Elser takes Kelly's academic model and translates it into something incredibly relatable in his doing the chores philosophy. He uses farm animals as metaphors to describe workplace behaviors. When describing that exemplary, effective follower, he calls them the busy bee.
The busy bee represents your star performer. They are highly engaged, they are independent critical thinkers, and they aren't afraid to dutifully and respectfully challenge the status quo. Most importantly, they're enthusiastically supporting the hive.
The farm metaphor runs throughout Elser's work. And while we won't turn this into an agricultural deep dive, the core analogy works perfectly for organizational dynamics. Think about the basic relationship on a farm. The farmer is the manager. They strategically plan, deciding which crops to plant, buying the seed, setting the schedule. But the farm hands are the contributors.
Yeah.
They're the ones actually executing the plan in the dirt.
And if the farmer makes a brilliant plan, but the farmhands lack a strong work ethic, or they ignore safety processes, or simply don't know how to operate the machinery, everything falls apart. Crops fail, animals suffer, and incredibly expensive equipment breaks.
The exact same thing happens in a corporate workplace. If your deskless workers, your retail staff, your warehouse team, basically your corporate farmhands fail at execution, the company loses money.
That is the essence of smart followership. It isn't about blindly doing what you are told like a conformist. It is about understanding the why behind the assigned work and executing it safely and effectively. In Elser's framework, it means presenting yourself as hungry, humble, and smart.
Hungry, meaning you are driven and eager to learn. Humble, meaning you let your results speak louder than your words, avoiding ego. And smart, meaning you possess the actual knowledge and emotional intelligence to navigate your job and the organization.
Imagine the productivity gains if you gave your frontline workforce the mobile, accessible tools they need to develop those exact traits. If you train them to be busy bees, you are directly optimizing the 80% of your workforce that dictates your daily success.
This really reframes the entire purpose of the L&D department. It is no longer just a pipeline for creating future executives. It is an operational engine for improving daily execution.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is clear that people skills belong to everyone. They belong to leaders, they belong to managers, they belong to followers, and they belong to collaborators. By embracing a learning strategy that embeds development into the workflow of every role, we foster a culture of inclusivity and mutual success. It democratizes development.
So what does this all mean for you, the L&D and HR leaders listening? It means that to get real ROI in today's tightening economy, where budgets are dropping to $1,254 per head, your development strategy must evolve. You cannot afford to spend it all at the top.
No, you can't.
Your learning interventions must be visible, they must be social, and they must reach the deskless and frontline workers who drive your success from the ground up. You have to move beyond Talent Development 1.0.
And for those of you looking to dive deeper into how to structure this kind of organizational shift, I highly encourage you to explore more of David Elser's work, including his holistic talent strategies at doingthechores.com. And remember, the core philosophy here, don't just aimlessly follow, you must always use the hashtag #FollowSmart.
To wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with a provocative chore challenge. Something for you to genuinely mull over the next time you were staring at a spreadsheet containing your department's training budget for the year. Ask yourself, what happens to your organizational performance when development is limited to a small group of managers and high-potential employees, while the contributors doing 80 to 90% of the actual work receive almost nothing? It might be time to rethink who truly deserves development in your organization.
What did you think of that deep dive? I'll be honest with you, the first time I listened to it after it was generated by AI, I thought to myself, wow, that was pretty interesting. I love the fact how they tied in ATD's report into some of the financials, right? Helping us better rethink the budget, and then obviously Robert Kelly's followership styles. But I'm just curious, what little nuggets did you get from that AI Chore Cast? If you have something, go ahead and share with me a comment. I would love to hear it. Before we wrap up this AI Chore Cast, I just have a few questions for you. After watching or listening to this Chore Cast, how would you define the difference between Talent Development 1.0 or Talent Development 2.0? And I would encourage you to go out to my blog at doingthechores.com to learn a little bit more about it. Also, what are your thoughts about creating more collaborators, not necessarily more leaders? And that is something I like to talk about. I honestly believe we need more collaborators that understand what actual leadership is. And we also need to be creating what I call smart followers, those who enthusiastically and effectively provide support while learning from others. So I'm just curious, when you look at those two areas of Talent Development 2.0, how do you think you and your organization could benefit educating others on those various, those new forward-thinking ideas? Lastly, before we wrap up this AI Chorecast, if you're a manager or if you're a training director, somebody who controls the training budget or the training strategy, what in this AI Chorecast really stood out to you? Did you have any aha moments? Because that's what I like to do. I like to challenge people to think differently. And some of these topics that I talk about, yeah, I get it. They're very, very forward thinking. But when you dive down, when you take a deep dive, right, you find that there's a lot of ROI in incorporating a holistic talent development program. And that's what I aim to do to help others achieve their organizational success, no matter where they sit inside that organization. So like I said, hopefully you enjoyed this AI Chore Cast. Subscribe, give me a like, give me a follow. And if you have suggestions for any future topics, go ahead and let me know. But until next time, make sure you go out there and create a great memory for someone today. Thank you.